At the heart of the Talam for star system, an unknown structure emerged from the cosmic void. It resembled a giant crystal, silently floating yet emanating an energy that distorted light and space around it. The first probes sent by the Galactic Union failed to decipher its nature. The signals it emitted were an incomprehensible combination of mathematical patterns and harmonic sounds. Humanity, however, noticed something no other species had. The signals weren't just codes. They were messages that interacted with human minds, generating fragmented visions and inexplicable sensations. "If this is a call, it's meant for us," declared Dr. Lyra Amani, a renowned linguist, during a meeting at the Galactic Senate. The discovery quickly became a point of contention across the galaxy. While the Drexons, a militaristic species known for their pragmatic approach, demanded that the structure be isolated and studied from a distance, humans argued that the signal had chosen their minds for a reason. To resolve the stalemate, the Senate authorized a joint expedition led by Commander Helena Oren of the human starship Aquila. "We're not just exploring," Helena said before departing. "We're carrying the weight of a possible future for the entire galaxy." Among the crew were Aaron, an engineer fascinated by advanced technology, and Carthel, a Drexon ambassador sent to ensure his species' interests were safeguarded. As the Aquila approached the artifact, now nicknamed Aether, the ship systems began to malfunction. Sensors detected space-time fluctuations as if the Aether were altering the laws of physics in its vicinity. Aaron, trying to keep the situation under control, was intrigued. "This isn't just a structure," he said while analyzing the data. "It's something alive, or at least conscious." But what puzzled everyone the most was the psychological impact on the crew. The Aether's signals began triggering inexplicable dreams and visions, some of which seemed to reflect deep fears and desires. "It's studying us," Lyra concluded, "and perhaps waiting for us to respond." Carthel, observing with skepticism, couldn't hide his unease. "This is a trap," he stated during an emergency meeting, "an attempt to manipulate our minds. We must abandon this mission before it's too late." But Helena knew retreat wasn't an option. "If this is a trap, it's the most complex one we've ever encountered," she replied. "But what if it's an opportunity? One we may never have again?" Carthel crossed his arms, visibly dissatisfied. "Your optimism may cost the galaxy dearly." When they finally reached the Aether, it responded to the Aquila's presence for the first time. Its crystalline surface began to pulse in a rhythm seemingly synchronized with the crew's heartbeats. As they drew closer, Helena was overwhelmed by a vision of collapsing planets and an infinite void consuming everything. "You've come seeking answers," an indistinct voice whispered in her mind. "But you will find choices." Helena fell to her knees, gasping for breath, as the Aether's lights flickered in a hypnotic pattern. "This isn't an artifact," she told her team. "It's something much greater, and it's waiting for us." The Aether's glow intensified as the Aquila's crew drew closer, casting irregular reflections on the ship's metallic surfaces. To Commander Helena Oren, the structure seemed alive, as if it were responding to their presence. "This is unlike anything we've ever encountered," she said, while Aaron, the chief engineer, frantically analyzed the data on his terminals. "The patterns are dynamic," Aaron explained, his eyes fixed on the screen. "They change as we approach. It's like it's studying us." Carthel, the Drexon ambassador, watched with a skeptical gaze. "Or manipulating us," he retorted. "Let's not forget, we don't know what this thing is." In the control center, Dr. Lyra Amani was engrossed in the signals emitted by the Aether. With her neural interface linked to the ship systems, she tried to decipher the patterns, which seemed to blend mathematical and linguistic elements. "There's something here," she murmured, almost to herself. "This isn't just a code. It's a message, or an invitation." Carthel scoffed. "An invitation to what? To be destroyed like the architects." Lyra ignored him, her eyes gleaming with a curiosity that defied the growing tension. "What if it's more than that? What if it's a map to something greater?" As Lyra continued her analysis, Helena received an alarming report from Aaron. "The ship systems are reacting to the Aether," he said. "It's not just our sensors. The entire operating system seems to be Tuning itself to it, the ship's lights began flickering in an unrecognizable pattern, and the air grew heavier, as if gravity had shifted. "This can't be possible," Aaron whispered. "It's like the ether is integrating with us." Carthel crossed his arms, his expression hard. "This only proves what I've said. We're being invaded." Tensions began to escalate among the crew. Carthel insisted that the ship should retreat immediately, while Aaron and Lyra argued that the ether was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for learning. Helena, bearing the weight of leadership, tried to balance their perspectives. "We're not here to act impulsively," she said firmly, "but we also can't ignore the fact that this thing is calling to us. If we want to understand what's at stake, we need to proceed carefully." The situation became even more complex when Lyra experienced the first vision induced by the ether. She saw flashes of an ancient civilization, its inhabitants surrounded by a golden energy that seemed to connect them collectively. But as the vision progressed, the balance unraveled, and the energy turned to chaos, destroying everything. Lyra collapsed on the control room floor, gasping for air, as the crew rushed to her side. "I saw," she began, her voice trembling. "I saw what happened to them. They chose to transform themselves and lost control." Lyra's vision cast a shadow of doubt over the crew. Carthel immediately seized the moment to bolster his stance. "This proves my point. The ether is a threat, and any choice it offers us will be a trap." But Aaron confronted him directly. "Or maybe they failed because they weren't ready. Maybe we can learn from their mistakes." The debate grew heated, and Helena had to step in. "This isn't about who's right," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "It's about understanding what's in front of us before we make any decisions." That night, as the ship orbited silently around the ether, the crew began experiencing dreams that felt shared. Each saw alternate versions of themselves. Helena as a solitary explorer in a barren universe, Carthel leading a fractured and weakened Drexon empire, and Aaron surrounded by technology so advanced that humanity seemed unrecognizable. By morning, the crew was restless, but no one wanted to discuss their dreams. "It's showing us possibilities," Lyra said to Helena, breaking the silence. "But what worries me most is, it's waiting for something. Something only we can give." The silence aboard the Aquila was oppressive. Since the shared dreams, the crew had avoided eye contact, each burdened by the weight of visions they couldn't explain. Outside, the ether continued to pulse, its light flickering in rhythms that seemed to echo in the minds of the crew. Helena, usually composed, felt her leadership slipping through her fingers. "This is dividing us," she confided to Lyra in a private meeting. "And the worst part is we don't even know what it wants from us." Lyra, her eyes fixed on her screens, replied, "Maybe it's not about what it wants. Maybe it's about what we want." As Lyra delved deeper into her analysis, the ether began projecting more intense visions. In the command center, Carthel watched warily as the room filled with living holograms. The images depicted entire civilizations ascending into new forms of existence, interconnected by a network of energy seemingly originating from the ether itself. But the visions also showed the collapse of these civilizations, torn apart by internal conflicts or a loss of identity. "This isn't progress," Carthel declared, his voice icy. "This is a warning. To transform is to lose who we are." Aaron disagreed. He watched the same projections but saw in them a reflection of possibility. "What if this isn't about failure?" he argued. "What if this is a second chance? An opportunity to correct the mistakes they made?" The debate grew heated, and Helena had to intervene. "Enough," she ordered. "We're here to understand, not to fight each other." But even she couldn't hide her doubts. The visions weren't just images. They stirred something deep within everyone. The psychological impact of the projections began to manifest in unexpected ways. One of the scientists panicked during a vision, screaming that he was trapped in a future that shouldn't exist. He had to be sedated and taken to the infirmary. But the incident cast a shadow of fear over the entire team. Lyra, increasingly captivated by the ether, tried to reassure the others. "These aren't literal visions," she explained. "They're possibilities, reflections of the choices we might make. It's showing us what's at stake. But Carthel wasn't convinced. He began to isolate himself, his paranoia growing by the day. To him, the Aether wasn't just a threat, it was a weapon designed to dismantle the cohesion of species. In a conversation with Helena, he expressed his skepticism bluntly. You humans have a fatal flaw, blind curiosity. You think you can control everything, but you end up creating your own destruction. Helena listened silently, feeling the weight of Carthel's words, but responded firmly. Maybe you're right, but maybe what you call a weakness is our greatest strength. Meanwhile, Lyra managed to decipher a new layer of the Aether's signal. Using her neural interface, she accessed data that seemed to be fragments of memory. These are echoes of the architects, she told Helena, her eyes wide with excitement. They faced exactly what we're facing now, to preserve or to transform. And the Aether was the catalyst for that choice. The revelation shocked the crew. Aaron, in particular, seemed deeply affected. So they failed, he concluded, almost in a whisper. Or they succeeded, and paid the price. At the height of the tension, the Aether projected a collective vision for the entire crew. They found themselves in a barren universe. No stars, no life, only the Aether glowing at the center. A figure appeared before them, composed of light and shadow. You bear the weight of the choice, the figure said, its voice reverberating in their minds. Preserve who you are or transform into what you can become. But remember, every choice has a price. The vision ended abruptly, leaving the crew in absolute silence. Helena, trying to maintain composure, looked at her colleagues. This isn't just a mystery anymore. It's a responsibility. The silence after the collective vision felt heavier than the empty space surrounding the Aquila. Each crew member was lost in their thoughts, grappling with the words of the figure of light and shadow. Lyra, however, wasted no time. While the others wrestled with their doubts, she directly connected her neural interface to the Aether, determined to uncover answers. If they faced this before, we can learn from them, she said to Helena, who hesitated before granting permission. But be careful. I don't want to lose you to this. As Lyra activated the interface, the Aether reacted immediately, flooding her mind with a torrent of images and sensations. She saw the architects as they were before their transformation, a brilliant, technologically advanced species, yet still bound by the same biological and emotional limitations humanity faced. They had created the Aether as an experiment, a bridge to transcend their constraints. They were divided, Lyra said, her voice muffled as she processed the data. Some believed transformation was the only way forward. Others feared losing their essence. As Lyra delved deeper into these memories, the Aether began projecting fragments of its history to the rest of the crew. Carthel watched silently as the architects debated the dilemma of preservation versus transformation. He saw their early experiments, the failures, and, finally, the moment they chose to risk everything. But what happened next was unclear. The projections showed cities consumed by the Aether's energy, entire civilizations collapsing as the fabric of reality seemed to unravel. This isn't evolution, Carthel said, his voice heavy with disdain. This is destruction. Aaron, however, saw something different. He noticed that the architects' failures were not necessarily the end. They didn't vanish completely, he argued. The Aether is still here. They left it for us, as a legacy. Maybe so we could fix what went wrong. Carthel couldn't hold back. Or they left it as a warning, to stop us from making the same mistakes. The tension between the two was palpable, and Helena stepped in before the situation escalated further. That's enough, she said firmly. Whatever happened to them, we need to understand why this is in our hands now. Lyra, still connected to the Aether, began to perceive something deeper. The memories of the architects weren't just history. They were interactive. The Aether allowed her to experience the dilemmas they faced, to feel their doubts and fears. They knew there was no right answer, she said, her voice tinged with emotion. What they did was embrace the uncertainty and move forward. They risked everything because they believed doing nothing was an even greater risk. The impact of these revelations began to shift the dynamics among the crew. Helena, who had been trying to balance the opposing views, started questioning her own neutrality. Maybe the architect's mistake wasn't transformation, she said during a meeting with Lyra and Aaron. Maybe it was how they did it. What if we're here to find a better way? Aaron agreed, but Carthel remained steadfast. There is no better way. There is only preservation or extinction. The Aether, as if responding to the rising tension, projected a new collective vision. This time, it showed a future where humanity and the Drexons worked together to unravel the universe's mysteries, striking a balance between tradition and innovation. But the vision quickly shifted to an alternate timeline, where the Aether was recklessly activated, resulting in a collapse that spread across the galaxy. This isn't just about us, Helena concluded after the vision. This choice will define the future of everything. Lyra finally disconnected from the Aether, exhausted but with a spark in her eyes that none had seen before. The answer isn't in their past, she said. It's in what we do now. They failed because they couldn't work together. We need to do this differently. Carthel remained silent, but Helena noticed something shift in him. Perhaps it was doubt or maybe curiosity. Either way, he didn't respond. The crew of the Aquila was at its breaking point. The revelations about the architects and the Aether's legacy had deepened divisions within the team, while the weight of the choice before them became unbearable. Helena knew the tension needed to be resolved before she could make a final decision. "We can't go on like this," she said to the crew gathered in the command center. "We're all here for a reason, but our differences are tearing us apart. If we can't find common ground, this legacy will be wasted." Carthel, arms crossed, looked at her skeptically. "And what would that common ground be?" he asked. "I see a group of humans obsessed with playing with something they don't understand, while my species watches an imminent collapse." Before Helena could respond, Aaron interjected. "Maybe that's exactly what the Aether wants," he said. "It's testing us to see if we can move past this us versus them mentality. If we can't work together, maybe we don't deserve what it offers." The discussion was abruptly interrupted as the Aether emitted a pulse of energy, plunging the ship into a state of suspension. The lights flickered, and the Aquila's systems stopped responding. Lyra rushed to the terminals, trying to comprehend what was happening. "It's isolated us," she said, wide-eyed. "We're trapped in an in-between space. It's forcing us to decide." The silence aboard was suffocating as every crew member felt the psychological pressure of the moment. The Aether projected a new vision, this time individually for each crew member. Helena saw herself in a devastated universe, where the wrong choice had led to the destruction of all species. Yet, she also glimpsed a future where humanity and the Drexons thrived together, exploring the cosmos with a shared purpose. Lyra experienced a similar dichotomy, a timeline where transformation had brought unimaginable advancements, but at the cost of losing her identity. Aaron saw a future in which the architect's legacy was abandoned, leaving the galaxy trapped in endless cycles of conflict. Carthel, however, saw a future where the Drexon Empire succumbed to transformation, losing its strength and unity. He also saw another timeline where his species, clinging to tradition, isolated itself completely and became irrelevant in the galactic sphere. When the vision ended, he appeared visibly shaken, but his expression was unreadable. Helena noticed his discomfort and pressed him. "You've seen what happens if we don't try," she said. "And what happens if we fail? Don't you think it's time to find an alternative?" The conflict reached its peak when Aaron proposed something radical. "What if we connect to the Aether as a team?" he suggested. "All of us together. Maybe that's what it wants, a collective decision, not an individual one." Carthel immediately objected. "That's suicide," he said. "What if we lose ourselves? What if it consumes us like it did the architects?" Lyra intervened. "And what if we don't?" she countered. "What if our inability to act is what dooms us?" Helena took a moment to reflect, feeling the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. "Maybe that's what the Aether is trying to show us," she said. "That the only way to overcome our fears is to face them together. If the architects failed because they were divided, maybe our strength lies in our unity." She looked at each crew member, trying to gauge their resolve. Aaron seemed determined, Lyra was hopeful, and even Carthel, despite his resistance, appeared more hesitant than before. Finally, Carthel stepped forward. "If I do this," he said, looking directly at Helena, "it's not because I believe in you. It's because I believe my species deserves to survive. And this might be the only way." Helena nodded, acknowledging the courage behind his words. "Then we'll do this together," she said, "and we'll face whatever comes." As one, gathered around the ether, each crew member placed a hand on its pulsating surface. The structure's energy enveloped them instantly, connecting their minds into a collective network. For the first time, they were no longer separate individuals but parts of a greater whole. They felt Carthel's doubts, Aaron's curiosity, Helena's determination, and Lyra's hope. The ether glowed brightly, as if responding to their collective strength, and then everything changed. The ether's energy enveloped the crew completely, dissolving the barriers between their minds and creating a state of shared consciousness. No longer divided, no longer isolated, their thoughts, doubts, fears, and hopes flowed together like a single unified stream. It was both liberating and terrifying. Helena tried to focus, but now she could feel Carthel's resistance, Aaron's burning curiosity, and Lyra's analytical mind as if they were her own. "We're in this together," she thought, and the phrase echoed like a mantra among them all. The ether began to present what felt like an interactive narrative, guiding the crew through glimpses of possible futures. One path shone with the promise of transformation. Humanity and the Drexons transcending their physical forms to become entities of pure consciousness, free from biological limitations. The other was more familiar but equally uncertain, preserving their current forms and continuing to face the universe's challenges with traditional tools. Both paths were fraught with dangers and potential failures. Somehow, both felt right and wrong at the same time. "This isn't a choice," Carthel said within the collective connection. His voice, more vulnerable than before, resonated in everyone's minds. "This is a cruel game. Neither option guarantees our survival." Lyra responded almost immediately, her voice filled with compassion. "Maybe survival isn't the only question. Maybe this is about who we want to become, even if the risk is great." Aaron, sensing Carthel's doubt, tried to soothe him. "If we remain stagnant, we won't survive anyway. The universe demands change." As the discussion unfolded within the shared consciousness, the ether began to change its physical form. Its crystalline surface cracked, revealing a pulsating core of energy that seemed to contain entire stars. The fractures emitted an intense light, forcing the crew to confront what felt like the final stage of the test. Another projection emerged, the past of the architects. The images showed them on the brink of transformation, but their internal divisions led to collapse. Unable to agree, their civilization fragmented into unrecognizable pieces. Helena finally understood what was happening. "The ether isn't giving us a binary choice," she said, her voice echoing clearly within the collective network. "It's testing us to see if we can find a third way. This isn't just about preservation or transformation. It's about deciding together, even when our perspectives are different." The realization brought a moment of clarity to everyone, but it also introduced a new layer of uncertainty. How could they agree on something so monumental? The ether's core pulsed more intensely, as if on the verge of collapse. "We're running out of time," Aaron said, feeling the growing pressure. Carthel hesitated for a moment before finally looking at Helena. "If you believe we can find balance, I'll trust you," he said, his resistance finally breaking. Lyra and Aaron nodded, ready for whatever was to come. "Then we'll decide together," Helena declared. With that, each of them projected their intentions into the ether. Their collective consciousness aligned, not around a specific choice but around an idea: balance. It wasn't a full surrender to the unknown nor an absolute rejection of change. It was an acceptance that evolution and preservation could coexist, that the future could be shaped without destroying the past. The ether glowed with an almost blinding intensity, and then everything stopped. When the crew awakened, they were back aboard the Aquila. The ether floated motionless in space, but something about it had changed. Its light was softer, and the cracks had disappeared, as if it were at peace. Helena turned to Lyra, who was frantically analyzing the ship's systems. "What happened?" she asked. Lyra looked up with a hesitant smile. "I think we passed the test. It didn't give us an answer, because we created our own." Aaron gazed out at the ether through the window, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "We didn't destroy the past or the future. We found a way for both to coexist. That's what it means to be human, or Drexon." Carthel, though still skeptical, didn't argue. He knew what they had done was something his species had never attempted, trusting others to shape their shared destiny. The ether remained motionless in space, its gentle light casting soothing reflections on the metallic surface of the Aquila. The crew watched in silence, each processing what had transpired. Helena, seated in the command room, felt the weight of everything they had faced. They had embarked on the mission seeking answers but left with something far more valuable. The understanding that the most important choices weren't about what to preserve or transform but about how to decide together. Lyra examined the data on her terminal with a mix of fascination and awe. "The signals have stopped," she said. "The ether isn't trying to communicate anymore. It's as if it's achieved what it needed." Aaron looked at her curiously. "Or maybe now it's our turn to communicate. It gave us something. A beginning, not an end." Helena nodded, understanding what he meant. The ether hadn't provided definitive answers because such answers didn't exist. It was an artifact of possibilities, shaped by the choices of those who interacted with it. Carthel remained silent for a long time, staring at the artifact through the main window. To him, the ether was still a dangerous mystery, but something inside him had changed. He turned to Helena and spoke, his voice calmer than ever. "You did something my species has never tried. You worked together even when you disagreed. Maybe that's what we're missing." Helena met his gaze. "Maybe it's what we all need to learn," she said. "Because the future we want can't be built alone." As the Aquila prepared to leave the system, the crew was called to one final meeting. Helena knew the Galactic Senate would demand explanations, but she also knew that many of the answers they had wouldn't make sense to those who hadn't lived through what they had experienced. "They're going to question everything," Aaron said as he adjusted the ship systems. "They'll call us reckless or visionaries. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that we did what was right." Lyra agreed. "And we've left an example for those who come after us." When the ship finally entered hyperspace, Helena watched the stars stretch into lines of light. The ether faded from view, but she knew it was still there, waiting for the next group brave enough to face it. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt hopeful. "Maybe we don't have all the answers," she said softly, almost to herself. "But now we know how to ask the right questions." In a remote corner of the galaxy, a new transmission began to spread. It was different from the ether's original signal, yet it carried a familiar signature. A pattern of light and sound that seemed to call towards something greater, something beyond. On a small observatory on a Drexon planet, a young scientist received the signal with a look of astonishment. He knew what he was hearing was impossible, but he also knew it was real. The ether had begun again, and the journey was far from over.